Well, my article this week that I looked at was actually a very short article. And it didn't provide too much detail, but I thought we could all kind of fill in some of the details with what we know going on in the industry and what it might mean. The article was about the Big Four accounting firm KPMG investing $5 billion in a technology surge, and so they're making a huge investment in, and I was about to say upgrading technology, but that's not really the right way to describe it. It's not like they're just going in and replacing servers and computers and things like that. The article did talk about them getting into cloud technologies and also looking at infrastructure, but just across the board. And KPMG was notable as it sounded like they may be the largest one on record doing for this, but they were rattling off the other Big Four's investments as well, the other Big Four accounting firms. So, for example, Ernst & Young, I think they said, made at least $1 billion, was making a similar type of surge for at least $1 billion. They talked about PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, doing something in the range of $3 billion. And so I think the moral to that, or the real information content in it for me, was, oh yeah, the big firms are making big investments in tech right now. What does that mean for the accounting industry, for accounting firms? What might that mean downstream for other accounting, the non-Big Four accounting firms, and how they handle technology?
Whoops, sorry. I think I'd kick that question back to you. When you're talking about downstream, are you talking, because the difference between, the Big Four, KPMG, and for our listeners, if you're not in the accounting realm, there's really four of the largest firms are concentrated, I guess, on top of the Big Four. So KPMG is one of those. And not just the hat that Phil Mickelson wears on golf Sundays. But when you're talking downstream, are we talking about like larger mid-sized firms that are nationwide? Or are you talking about like maybe 4 or 5 partners in like a localized area?
I mean,
are you talking about both?
I'm questioning, what it means for everyone. But I mean, I think if we're just for context, if we're stratifying, you're right. So you've got the Big Four, and then you still have pretty large international and national firms. And, you could list off some, but I'm sure to miss one, and then they get mad here. But,
right.
Here in the Portland area and on the West Coast, and they're now nationwide, Moss Adams is a really big firm. Grant Thornton has been a worldwide firm. You've got BDO and... iBailey, and like I said, what is it, RSM? I mean, the list goes on. So if I missed you, I'm sorry, but
basically a never-ending list of acronyms, right?
And you got Clifton Larson, and
we cheat them and how?
Right. Yeah. So you've got a lot of these like national and sometimes even international firms that maybe aren't as big as the Big Four, but they're big worldwide or national organizations. And then you've got large regional and local firms. I mean, here in the Portland metro area, we have, 6 to 8 kind of pretty large firms that actually, in and of themselves, sometimes they're doing more volume of work than the Big Four might be doing here in the Portland metro itself. And then you also, and I think other locations see that as well. So you've got kind of the large locals and regionals, and then you get down to what you're talking about. You've got like, the firms that are, 4 or 5 partners or just one CPA, and maybe they have a crew and maybe they don't, kind of thing. So you've got all of that and everything in between. Is there anything to be gleaned from the fact that the big firms are all suddenly pouring in a bunch of cash into technological development?
Well, I think we can glean something. I think these type of investments in the technology, if used correctly, can really speed up efficiency and open up new lines of business. And what that means for people downstream is, no mom and pop 5-partner firm can afford to implement anything close to what this is. I can speak from personal experience. The firm that I just left, they made a major investment in there. And when I say major, we're only talking like, a couple tens of thousands of dollars, and that was a lot for them in their technology itself. And that was a small incremental upgrade from what we had before. And that was basically just modifying or modernizing the systems that they already had in place. So when you're talking about, what was it, 5 million or billion?
5 billion.
Billion with a
Yeah,
B.
Yeah.
A
When
big
you're
B.
yeah. When you're talking that kind of investment, you're talking about, leading in technology and trying to lead in efficiency.
Yeah.
And changing the way that industry works, like how you communicate your information to them will likely be influenced by what happens here, how many people are involved, and that sort of thing will, go down as more and more efficiencies are integrated.
So I think the question then is, how can the smaller guys compete? And I'm specifically thinking of the 5-person CPA firm. Midsize is going to get there eventually.
Sure.
They're just not going to drop $5 billion now. They're going to drop $1 million a year for the next 10 years and get close.
Right.
Or not offered the line of business that KPMG, ramped up for, right? Whatever KPMG is planning in the back end for service offerings on the back of this technology explosion.
Well, I mean, what you just asked, I think, kind of triggered a thought that I hadn't considered before, asking how do they compete? Because traditionally, we wouldn't think of a 5-person CPA firm even trying to compete with a KPMG. They're just not in the same markets at all.
Sure.
And a Big 4 accounting firm just doesn't try to serve the same type of clientele that a local accounting firm or a small accounting firm would, because the cost of the people and the training and everything that they put in to their teams is just too high to really service the small business community. But if you're changing your service model to be highly technology enabled, then that might change. And in fact, I think we have seen this offline. We all saw that KPMG had rolled out this service called KPMG Spark, and we don't know much about it other than the advertisements and just kind of poking around their website. But it looked like that they are kind of they are trying to compete downstream in the sense that they have an offering with like a fixed fee for doing startup companies bookkeeping, and then if you wanted, you could have an add-on for some basic tax return prep, and then if you wanted, you could pay a fee for some business consulting on top of that. And so there maybe that could be the part of the strategy is, where it'd be unthinkable for large firms to try to compete in the small business market with local firms with technology. Maybe they are thinking about something like that.
Well, and that was exactly where I was headed, because I think with this technological jump, they can swim downstream and pick up. Think about it. If you're KPMG and you're doing somebody's books, how hard then is it from your system that's already hooked up to your tax software? How hard is it to plug that through and the tax return does itself?
Right.
Remember, a small business has a balance sheet. It's really easy.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I suspect that I suspect that, and what seemed to be the case from the way they were targeting that KPMG Spark offering, for example, is it seemed to be that they were targeting high growth companies that were basically startup, and that was why they were small. But I suspect part of that strategy may simply be grab them while they're small, and we have a low cost of service because we're doing most of the service through technology, and then we'll be there when they are larger organizations that would otherwise buy KPMG level services, right? So I think that may be what that firm's looking at and what other larger firms might look at.
I guess the point that I was trying to make was, I guess, from my personal opinion, if you're one of those smaller to mid-sized firms in a local area, I think the way you differentiate yourself is through service and through your niche.
Yeah.
I think is where you have to really, I hate to sound like Gary V. Light or something, but your brand, right? You need to follow your brand in that way, because KPMG as a behemoth isn't going to be able to match that with any amount of technology, maybe possibly at some point.
Sure. Well, this has been exactly a concern that I have, is it gets into this issue of the convergence of technology organizations and service organizations, right? And so, we saw software companies moving towards trying to be more like service companies with the terminology of software as a service, and the idea that they're not just going to sell you software, but you're going to pay a subscription for software, across other industries. I'm not talking accounting specifically here, but SaaS, the fundamental premise is we sell you software as a subscription, and along with that software comes opportunity for services that you might buy from us. And so that was taking kind of a traditional technology software company and turning it partly into a service company. So, you might frame that as a technology company that is supplemented by services, right? Mm-hmm. But then what you see with service firms is going the other direction, right? You see service firms that are now thinking about how can they roll out technology, and so now you've got service firms that are being augmented by technology, and so I think that's probably that's the way the market looks now, and I think it will for a while. You'll see kind of where one of those is dominant, either the service or the technology, but it seems like they're converging on each other.
Yeah, I think that's very true.
Well, I'm wondering too, when you're talking about that, I'm seeing the tuner buttons, kind of moving to the center. And the thing that what I'm hoping isn't happening is kind of what happened to like the pizza industry in the late 80s, early 90s. Do you guys remember when Pizza Hut was like good pizza?
No.
No,
No?
no, I don't
Get
have
'em.
that. I don't know that. I don't have that big of opinion on pizza, so
Okay.
I'll give you that.
Okay.
But let's say yes.
Yes. Okay. So back in the 80s or 90s, they used to make, I actually was in the pizza industry for a while, but they used to make their own dough in-house at Pizza Hut and then, like the cast iron skillets. It was
Sounds like that would be good.
yeah, it was more of an art. It's not what you find today, right? It's not like at the airport, the personal pan pizza stuffed in a box that's been, they use frozen dough now. Pizza Hut was bought by the conglomerate that is KFC, what is it, Yum Brands or whatever it is.
Okay,
At KFC, Taco Bell, and Pizza Hut all got rolled up into one. But back before that happened, they actually had decent pizza. And what happened was, I think it was a VC firm or whoever bought this up and rolled everybody together, and they started making centralized dough, freezing it, sending it out, so everything's the same across the board. Domino's did the same thing. Domino at one time had decent pizza, and it was basically a race to the bottom of who can get the cheapest pizza to somebody's front door at the least amount of price. But what really suffered was the quality of the pizza. You guys laughed when I said, you remember when Pizza Hut was a good pizza? At one time it was.
Yeah.
But the market competition drove everybody to the, race to the bottom. Who can get the cheapest ingredients, who can get the cheapest delivery time, and who can get the thing there the fastest. And quality suffered. And that's what I'm hoping isn't what's going to happen here, where everybody's taking a race to the bottom to be the most efficient, the most cloud-based, and quality of work suffers.
I think that is exactly what's happening. At least that's my observation of what's happening in the local accounting firm markets. But I think what you hit on earlier, then, that is perhaps the way you stand out, is by continuing to provide great service and knowing what that means and standing out for that. I've been of the opinion that any accounting business has to look at, and it's probably not the only industry that has to look at this, but has to look at becoming somewhat of a technology company, or what I realized later, and I think our game plan is obvious on this point, either a technology company or a media company. Right. I think those are your options. And so I think a lot of firms aren't doing enough to move that direction, but because I don't think the $5 billion level of investment is actually necessary for an established accounting firm to become somewhat of a technology company. I think there is the resources out there that an accounting firm who wants to make the investment could bring in some developers and could put together some customized apps, for example, put together some customized technology that both does their brand and also kind of supplements their service with some customized or proprietary type technology. I think all the firms are onto the idea of using technology to be more efficient,
right?
But they're all using the same technology. So, I laugh when firms talk about, well, we're going to use software better than anybody else, and therefore we're going to have a lower cost of service and be able to provide higher quality at a lower cost, and that's how we're going to win, because we're going to use the software that every other firm happens to be using, by the way, just better. Yeah, right. That to me doesn't totally feel right. There is some truth to that, because we know from experience, some firms, even if you're looking at local firms, some firms invest in technology faster than others. Like the paperless was the thing of the last decade, right? Some firms got there quicker, some firms got there slower. So yeah, I guess there is, within a decade, there's probably some competitive advantage for the firms that are willing to invest and get there sooner. But everyone is becoming paperless eventually. Like it's not a sustainable competitive advantage.
No.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is I saw in the article that it was talking about how Ernst & Young has decided to focus on the artificial intelligence side of it. So that'll be like the next big fad of how do we integrate artificial intelligence into our accounting processes. And
No, I suspect that's where a lot of that money is going, especially because for these, the thing to appreciate, small firms, tax is a big deal.
Yeah.
But in these large firms, tax is a deal, but they're really driven a lot by audit. Audit and audit revenues is a huge deal. And so the audit process and the way how you can automate that and the artificial intelligence that might be deployed in the selection of audit procedures and checklists and things that the auditors can use and making dynamic decisions, because auditor judgment is the expensive part for firms, right? Is that you have experienced auditors with technical accounting experience and industry experience. And as their teams are working through a complex company auditing and they discover this or they discover that, they make game time decisions about what's the next procedure that we may need to do, right? And so if that can be replaced with AI, that's like, well, if you get through here and this or this happens, then let's throw in a different procedure. If they can start replacing human judgment with some artificial intelligence, there will be a huge cost saving for these big firms, because that's where their big cost is having the higher cost, very experienced people who can make those kind of judgments. If you can replace that with AI, then that's the new world right there.
I think it even enables people to get away from like sampling and whatnot. Like if you have artificial intelligence that's able to decide how to approach a problem, then doing the entire problem as opposed to selecting a subset of transactions to look at becomes a really feasible option. I think it just changes the entire way that the audit process will work.
And I think, to be clear though, and like, stop me if I'm wrong, but I think this is probably the point where people that are over the age of like 50 freak out, because they're like thinking that you're going to lose the human touch to AI and somehow you push a button and a company audits itself. Mm-hmm. That's not going to happen. Well, I don't see it happening. I mean, it's a possibility, but I find it a small possibility, because there are things that machines can't do, like sit in front of somebody and talk to them about fraud or procedures or any of the other stuff that's involved with an audit in that kind of realm.
I can't debate that from a technical merit, other than to say my understanding from the reading I've done about what's coming in artificial intelligence is that it will be able to do far more than we think it can do from a judgment and interpretation standpoint, and that we're all going to be blown away with what it's able to do. So yeah, I think the thing is that can a company be self-audited by the push of the button? I think where people would argue against that is exactly on those lines, that the AI cannot, the cognitive reasoning, it's inconceivable to us in our human brains that you could program the cognitive reasoning into a machine that would be able to suspect problems or have intuition about things, or things like that. But I think the counter arguments to that, first off, is it goes to this point that machines are going to be able to read variables that we can't even imagine. Like when you think about it, what is intuition, right?
Sure.
Or what is suspicion? What is that kind of squishy experience factor? Will a machine be able to smell the sweat that somebody has? Would a machine be able to read certain facial quirks or body gestures and interpret those? Are there algorithms that could possibly do that kind of thing? That's how sophisticated we're talking AI is going to be. And so I can imagine a scenario where, in fact, machines are actually far more reliable than our gut ever was at
Yeah, and
this kind of stuff.
it's like I saw the Matrix and auditors didn't come up once, not a single time, not once. So
Charlie's got
it
jokes
must
on
be, you know.
Well, I think there's the meta of it, though. It's like,
Right.
I think where it goes is, okay, the machine can do it, but do we trust the machine?
No.
Right.
Never.
So I think that's what it comes down to, right? Is it's like, well, in order to maintain human control, then whether we need to or not, we may still always have that human presence, or for a long time still have that human presence over a great number of things, including audits. I also think when it comes to auditing and things of accounting in nature that are regulatory in nature, we also know, like we were talking earlier about accounting. Some accounting firms took a decade to get to paperless, right? There's no one slower than the U.S. government on getting, or Congress on figuring things out, right? So I believe that the technology and the capability for machines to do everything in that regard will come a lot faster than the regulatory environment will allow that to happen. That is because it would take acts of Congress to like basically start saying we're going to turn audits entirely over to machines with no kind of human interaction or very little human interaction. There's going to be a lot of regulatory hurdles to overcome. Maybe acts of Congress isn't exactly right, but perhaps acts of Congress. There's certainly federal regulators in there like the SEC, and then the private regulators like the FASB and the AICPA that would be involved in accounting and audit tasks being turned over to machines. And I think that, yeah, I just think all that regulatory framework will move a lot slower than the actual technology and capabilities will. So auditors, I wouldn't be afraid of you losing your jobs entirely or your roles anytime soon, because I think that the profession will drag out for a long time just because of the regulatory issues.
I'll tell you what you have convinced me of. When I get home, I'm gonna take Alexa and throw her across the yard, and she hasn't become sentient yet and tried to kill me in my sleep, and I'm not taking any chances.